Hello, it's Sean from Sean Bond Miniature Painting. Today I'm going to be showing you how I painted up my Death Korps of Krieg. These guys are just done to a nice tabletop standard. They look great when they're all just mass produced and put together. And the sort of tips and tricks I'm going to go through today are nice and simple and give you like a nice good foundation for how to paint, more detailed characters if you need to. So let's jump in. Alright, so this is our example guardsman for today. He's built out of the Death Korps kill team box. I've given him a Mechanica standard base coat. Just use any sort of bluish grey if you don't have that to hand. And then I used my airbrush to give him a base coat of Fenrisian grey. You can use the brush, obviously, if you don't have one. This is mostly just to give a bit of a foundation to the coat, since that's the sort of majority colour of the model, so just sort of make sure you paint that up. So the first colour we're going to be going in with is going to be Corvus Black, and we're going to use this to paint the boots, to paint his gloves, and to paint the tubey bit that comes out of his gas mask and goes into the weird box on his chest. So it may or may not go without saying, but I will be doing two thin coats for all of the base coats for our Death Korps, just to give us a nice solid foundation colour. So I'm still relatively new to all this YouTubey stuff, so please enjoy as I continue to slowly pull the mini out of the camera shot and repeatedly focus on my fingers rather than anything people actually want to see. I'm sure as we go along, and hopefully I'll make some more videos, that I will get better at this, but in the meantime, please bear with me, and if you've got any tips or tricks, then fire away. Pop them down in the video comments for me, and I will have a look and endeavour to implement them in the future to give you better content, because realistically that's what we all want. So up next, now that we've got the boots, gloves and the tube painted, we're going to grab some Carrick stone, and we're going to use this for the bootstraps, for the sort of canvasy section of his gas mask, and for the top of his backpack, that sort of bedroll. You can also use it if you've got bits like I have here, the additional sort of rolls and accessories on his backpacks. Feel free to slap some on there, or even use some different bounds later on. I will be going pretty damn basic with it, just because I can't be bothered. So that's our two thin coats of Carrick stone all done. Now we're going to move on to Abaddon Black, however you say it. Or just any sort of dark, glossy-ish flat black will do fine for this, but this is going to be used for the weapon casing, for the armour, and this will start to make him look like an actual guardsman rather than a blue block with socks. So yeah, go and get that on in there. You don't have to be too tidy with a lot of these early layers, which is kind of nice. You just want to avoid getting it on the coat, and obviously layers that you've done already, but a lot of the gun barrel and stuff like that, we're going to do that silver and metallic later on, so you don't have to really be too tidy. One other thing I'll also cover with this Abaddon Black is the little square block plates on the back of his hands, just to paint them in and make them look a little bit like small armor plates on his gloves, and we'll add those in too. But I'll forget to do it here, and I'll come back and I'll touch it up later on. Right, black's all done. So now we're going to come in and start painting in our metallics. Anything from, lead belcher to Vallejo gunmetal is absolutely fine for this. I find a lot of the time with metallics on basic inventory, especially like this, it's more just down to personal preference of, what sort of metallic you like using. So for this, it's going to be pretty much all metallics. So the centerpiece of the box on his chest, the little apparatus on the side, the belt buckle, the gun barrel and magazine, obviously the bayonet, because if it wasn't made of metal it would be a rubbish bayonet. Then also the eye lenses and the top section where the tube meets the gas mask, that will be all done metallic, and the sort of rations can on his rucksack as well, and for good measure, why not the tip of that water bottle that he's got strapped on as well. Some of you more eagle-eyed viewers might have spotted that I now have a dot on the piece of paper behind my little Krieg guardsman. That is so I can try, although currently fail, at keeping him actually in the middle of the screen so you can see him. Yeah, with the metallics, back to the actual painting topic, I'm also going to use this to do the little skull insignia on his gun, the aquila on his helmet, and then there's also a weird little ring thing on the back of the helmet so they can, I don't know, hang it up at the end of a hard day's worth of warfare. So that'll all just be done in metallics as well. Speaking of metallics, gold now. I'm using auric armor from Citadel for this one. There's not a massive amount of gold on these models, or at least not as much as I like to paint. This is just going to be for the little clasps on the top of his bedroll, and any little bits of insignia floating around. I tend to find that, I don't know, they're basic infantry, they wouldn't have lots of funky gold stuff. But if you want the skull on his gun to be gold, or the aquila on his helmet to be gold, you go for it, knock yourself out. Or even the buttons on his coat, they could be gold. I've left them off, but on some of the character models I've just done them black, just to sort of break up the coat a little. But again, you do you, sure Mini. And even on some of the characters, I've mixed together a nice one-to-one mix of auric armor and ironbreaker. I tend to find that works quite well on models like this when you're sort of going to dirty them down later. Up for the next colour, I've got Dryad Bark, and I'm just going over all of the sort of rucksack pack sections, the box on his chest, which I will forget while painting this, but will remember later and come in and touch up without you seeing, because video editing is magic. Yeah, so we're just going to go do all the rucksacky stuff with Dryad Bark. I prefer it normally to Rhinox Hide. I think Rhinox Hide looks a little bit dark and glossy, but Dryad Bark tends to be a bit more natural, earthy tones, which, you know, personal preference, it's just a me thing. Alright, now he's actually looking like an actual guardsman though. So time to sort of tie the last bits in together. Literally, we are going to go on to painting all of the straps and sort of belts and things. I'm going to use Gorthor Brown for this. Just go over, do the belt, do the straps up over his shoulders, do the straps on his backpack that's holding all his equipment together, everything, the bedroll, any sort of strappy bits and bobs that you can reach. It's a pain in the butt to paint the straps going up over his shoulders without getting paint on the shoulder pads. So 99.9% of the time I give up and paint the straps going over the shoulder pads, because it's easier to come back and just paint black back over the top corners of the shoulder pads than it is to try and navigate the brush up and around the corners. With the second layer of the Gorthor Brown done and the shoulder pads touched back up so it's not so messy, he is pretty much finished with all the base coats. Our next step will be a fairly big step, which will be kind of nice, and we can bring him in and tie him in to make him look a lot like our demo guardsman here. I'm going to go ahead and add some transfers onto the shoulders. I like the Skullacula on one side and 179th on the other. That's my little battle group of choice. No particular reason, it just was the number that shouted out to me when I stared at the transfer sheet for 5 minutes. So let's go ahead and get cracking with our next step. Alright, the transfers are on. I've left him for a good amount of time, just left him overnight so that I've made sure that all of the base coats that we've got down have had time to properly dry and cure. And then we're going to go in with an enamel wash. This is AK Interactive Rust Streaks, and this is going to go nice and messily over the entire model. Those of you who have worked with or seen enamel washes before probably know what the step after this is going to be. Everyone else is now looking at me like I'm a moron and just about to ruin the whole thing. So trust the process, make sure you get in all the little nooks and crannies, that little sort of bit of cloth between his leg, in between the sort of rucksack and his back, under his arms, in his armpits, underneath all the armour panels. Just give it a good heavy wash. So that's that finished off. He's got a nice base coat down. You can see it's a little bit splattery, so make sure you put something down just to save yourself from ruining your paint desk. So I've left this to dry for probably about 20 minutes. It's nice for if you're batch painting a squad. By the time you finish the last one, you're ready to go back to the first one. And we're going to start removing some of that enamel wash to make him look more like our demo guard. So I've got a cheap makeup sponge, and I'm just going to start going over the entire model, taking the excess off of the topmost raised parts. What's really nice about the rust streaks is I really like this sort of tint that it gives to that Fenrisian blue. It looks more like a greeny, grimy blue now than it does that sort of bright blue that we had at the start. So yeah, make sure you just sort of go around with your makeup sponge, take it off of all the raised areas. The harder you rub with this, the more that it's going to come off. So it's better to start lighter, and then you can go back over and sort of keep going until it reaches the tone that you want, rather than going heavy-handed and take too much off and have to start the whole process all over again. So once we're done with the makeup sponge, we're going to come in with a Q-tip. We can just use this to reach all of the areas that we couldn't reach with the makeup sponge. It's a little bit more coarse than the sponge, so this will remove a little bit more, so you want to be nice and gentle with this. And I'll use it to go over sort of the transfers as well, just to clean them up a little and make them look a little bit bolder. And just a little bit more sort of precise paint removing compared to the sponge. So I've left our enamel wash overnight to dry, and now we're ready to move on to the final step, which is putting the mud and the battlefield debris around the bottom of his cape. So I've got a rubbish old brush and gone back to our Gawthor brown, and similar to dry brushing, I'm going to take the majority of the paint off the model and just sort of stipple and dry brush this all along the bottom of the coat up to probably about halfway. This is 1 out of 2 layers that we're going to be doing on this, so you want to go a little bit higher, just to give that sort of mud splats and battlefield weathering all over anywhere that you sort of reasonably expect it to be. So around his knees, where he might be kneeling down, or resting up against the trenches, ducking and diving behind cover and all sorts. And now we've got our dried bark, and we're going to do exactly the same thing. We're just not going to come quite as high up the model, so we're just going to sort of put specks of that around the base of the coat, and then go a little bit thicker around his boots, as the bases that I have for these guys are quite sort of trench muddy bases, so it will fit into the rest of the base quite nicely. And with the stippling done around the base there, he is pretty much finished and ready to join the ranks with his friends. I do hope you enjoyed this tutorial and you found it useful. I'd love to see if you give it a go. Feel free to pop it in the comments or tag me on Instagram at SeanBond_miniature painting. Please do like and subscribe, because that means the more I get, then the more I know people appreciate these videos and the more I'm going to make. Take care.